Okay, today I'm going to show you how to do off-camera flash with your Olympus Pen-F. Okay, so using off-camera flash is definitely a technique you need to have in your photography skill set. It's a very powerful technique, and once you start using off-camera flash, you don't want to leave the house without a flash again. At least, for me, I always like to have a flash unit with me in addition to my Pen-F. So generally speaking, to do off-camera flash, you don't need a lot of complicated gear, because I've seen people out there with like radio flash triggers and multiple lighting setups and lighting stands. And when you're out with the Pen-F or any Micro Four Thirds system, really all you need is a second flash, right? But the flash needs to have a couple of features. One, you need to get a flash that has an optical trigger, and then it also has to be able to be controlled manually, the flash output power on the back here. So those are really the only two requirements: manual control of the power output and an optical trigger. And then for the Pen-F, all you're going to need is the little tiny flash that came with it to trigger the off-camera flash. And then you need to put the camera into manual mode. And I'll show you the settings I use. It's very simple. And once you start shooting in manual, you probably will learn a lot of other things about photography when you're shooting in manual, and thereby expanding your skill set. But in any case, for this off-camera flash demonstration, I basically have this prop here, and I'm going to take a couple of pictures of that, and then I'll show you a couple of pictures I took this week of some flowers, and then we'll go outside and you can kind of follow me along in real time as I practice a couple of different shots using this off-camera flash on some leaves and a portrait of myself. Okay, so that's basically that. Now, as far as off-camera flashes go, the one that I use here is an ep.29, and I recommend this flash over buying, say, one of the cheaper Chinese ones like Mikey and Lanier, because I tried using those flashes. They have the basic requirements: an optical trigger and manual control. But what I found was that the optical trigger was both too sensitive and not sensitive enough at the same time, and it really caused a lot of inconsistency in firing. And just to kind of give you an example of what happened is, I was using the Mikey flash or the newer flash, it didn't matter. When I was outside in the shade, it was kind of okay. It was firing most of the time. I was kind of getting by. But then, as soon as I walked over into the sunlight, the flash fired on its own, because it seemed to think that the sun was actually the camera's flash. And then I had a hard time getting it to fire again. I went back into the shade. I covered it with my hand. I don't know whatever happened, but the firing consistency was very, very inconsistent from there forward. And I tried turning the flash on and off again, but basically the flash is too sensitive, or the trigger on it was too sensitive. It's just firing the flash and then getting stuck all the time. The other problem is that it's too insensitive. It's not sensitive enough, because when I set those flashes up on a light stand, say 10 feet away, they weren't firing because they weren't detecting the flash on the camera firing. And you can resolve that with radio triggers and stuff, but or the other solution might be to increase the power on the on-camera flash, but that's going to affect the exposure of the subject I'm taking. So optical triggers on those cheap flashes are just terrible, so don't rely on those. Your better option really is to go on to eBay and buy a used ep.29, and I have a link down below for this particular one. This is a very high quality, high powerful flash that's really going to expand your creative skills when you go into using off-camera flash. I bought a couple of these. One I bought a pair of them for $25, mainly because the hot shoe was broken on them. But if you want to get just one in good working order, it's maybe $40 or $50, which is still, really cheap compared to the, dedicated TTL Olympus flashes for $300-400, right? but you can get by with just an SB26. So let's go into the settings for the camera and the flash, and then do a couple of test shots. Okay, so let's go into the camera, and I'm going to go into the menu here and just do a basic reset so we're all on the same page. And then let me format my memory card too, just for the heck of it. Okay, now that's done. So first thing I want to do is go into the setup menu down here, custom setup. And I'm going to scroll down here to the lightning bolt, which is the flash menu. And the two settings I'm looking at here is the flash sync speed and the slow limit. And the flash sync speed is now at 250, which is actually the fastest shutter speed possible, and that's what I'm going to stick with, is 1/250th, because I want to crush the ambient light as much as possible. And then for the slow limit, you can leave that at 1/60th. There's reasons for changing that, which I don't want to get into, just for the sake of, I want to keep this simple. So just leave that at 1/60th. And then this last setting here is to exposure comp on the flash, so it'll reduce or increase the exposure of the output of the flash based on the exposure the camera thinks is correct. And you don't need to worry about that, because we're going to put this flash in manual mode. Okay, so that's it for that. And then you want to be in manual mode, and make sure your settings are at 1/250th, and the default seems to be here at f5.6. I'm going to change that because I'm indoors. I'm going to lower that down. Let's see, down to say let's try f3.2. That should be about right for this lighting, and you get a feel for these things after you've been taking pictures a while. But in any case, those are the settings I'm going to go with for this, and I think that's it. Actually, there is one more thing. Go into the Super Control panel and go into the flash menu here, and right now it's in fill in or auto, which you don't want. You want to change this to manual. And I want this to be in the lowest power setting possible, because right now you can see it says full or it's at full power. So you click the oops, let me go back in. You just click the info button, and you can kind of scroll down to its lowest power setting, and it looks like it's going in half or third stops. But let's go down. 1/64th is the lowest power setting for this flash. Okay, and that's it for the settings on the Olympus Pen-F. And those are the settings I essentially use for all of the examples I'm going to show from here on out. Okay, now let's look at the SB26. And on the front of the flash, basically you have this optical sensor switch, and I'm going to set this to S or single, which basically it's going to fire one time. And then on the back of the flash, I'm going to set it to normal and manual mode, this switch here. There's also auto for the, because I think it has a built-in light sensor, and there's also strobe effect, which you can do some pretty neat things too as well, which I might show in another video, but for this demonstration we're going to keep this in manual. There's a couple other settings. You can change the focal length of the lens, or not the focal length, but the spread of light. So at 24 millimeter, it's going to try and spread the light in a 25 millimeter point of view, and that's the setting I'm going to use for all the examples going forward. You can narrow the beam down to as little as 85 millimeters, and you can do some creative things with that, but for today I'm just going to stick with 24 millimeters. And then the only other button you need to worry about is the M button here to change the flash power. Right now it seems to be set in 1/64th, but you can see if I click it, we're at full power. And each click of this button reduces the flash power by one stop. So now we're at half power, 1/4 power is another stop down, half of that is 1/8, so now we're down 3 stops of light, and so on. So I'm going to set this down to 1/64th power because it's a pretty powerful flash, and I'm going to be shooting this subject here, my little halo creature, with handheld with the flash, and it's relatively close to the flash, so I want this to be as low power as possible. And again, that I just learned that through experimentation. Okay, so let's take a couple of pictures now, because that's all you need to do to set on the flash and set on the camera. First picture I actually want to take is, you know, what the camera will do on its own. So I'm going to actually put the camera back into aperture priority and change the flash and put that back onto, not auto, but I'm going to put it onto fill in. Because if I put it on auto, it may not even fire, because it may think there's enough light already. So I'm going to put the flash into fill in so that it will definitely fire every time I hit the shutter. So let me double check that. Yep, I'm on fill in. Okay, and I'm at f3.2, and then the camera's going to adjust ISO and shutter speed on its own. So let's take a picture here, and sorry, let me turn this off so it doesn't go off accidentally. Let's take a picture here and see how that looks. Okay, that's okay. I mean, it's underexposed slightly because there's a lot of white around here, but you can see the flash really didn't do much on its own. And generally speaking, this is not a picture I would use. I would probably try and take it again by changing other settings. But since we have an off-camera flash, let's see what we can do with that. So first thing I'm going to do is turn the flash head over to my left, because I'm going to be holding this flash with the optical trigger in my left hand. And then let's go ahead and put the camera back into manual mode. And then I'll need to go back in and change the flash back to manual mode. And it's still in 1/64, so we'll click OK. And my shutter speed's at 2/50th, which is what I want. And that's about the right aperture for this lighting, f3.2. Okay, and then I'm going to turn on my flash, and as you can see, it's still in 1/64th power, 24mm. Alright, now, I think everything's ready. I think one other thing I'll change, and let me see. Just going to change the focal point to single point focus, because that's normally how I shoot. Okay, so I'm going to focus right there on this creature's head, hold this flash like so, and let's take a picture out there and see how that looks. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting, right? Definitely very different, plenty of light. Okay, and let's try something else. I'm going to try for a little bit creepier shot. So let's turn the flash head back towards me a little bit. And let's try the light directly in front but kind of underneath it. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's kind of creepy, right? Okay, and we'll do one last shot. I'm going to turn the flash head back around to the front facing to give it a little bit of fill, even though it's set very low. And I'm going to put the flash behind, and this is a very common technique for portrait photography, so you kind of get that hair rim lighting. Now let's see what the lighting looks like when I put the flash behind the subject. Let's see what happens there. And yeah, that looks pretty cool. So there you have it. In about a minute, I took 4 different pictures with 4 very different looks just by moving the flash around. And that's why off-camera flash is such a powerful skill set to have. And I really didn't have to play with settings or anything. Everything I just set once and we were good to go. So let's go, let me show you a couple of pictures I took this week while I was out, you know, on my daily walks. And this one here is just a flower with a bee on it, without the flash, just straight out of camera, and that's how it came out. And you know, it's a fine picture. I mean, it's nice, but let's look at what happens when I use the off-camera flash. And basically what I did is I held the flash over to the right and fired it this way. And I would have turned the flash head unit towards my right as well. And this picture is also at I think this one's at f5.6, 1/250th of a second. And look how much nicer that picture is. I mean, the colors and the contrast and the textures and everything really seems to pop compared to the previous picture without an off-camera flash. Let's take a look at this next picture, and kind of the same thing, straight out of camera, no flash. It's a nice picture of a couple of flowers, but let's see what this looks like with a off-camera flash. Basically, for this picture, I held the flash up this way, straight up from the top, and you can see that it crushed the ambient light in the background because I was at 1/250th of a second. But I had the flash light the subject in the front, and you can see now the flowers stand out much more from the background. And of course, again, there's more texture and more color in the picture. And that's a good example of crushing the ambient light in the background. Let's look at the next picture. And this picture actually is really nice straight out of camera. I had nice morning warm glow light coming in kind of at an angle, and it really illuminated the flowers in the background really nicely. But I wanted to see what it would look like if I used the off-camera flash, so again I probably put the light over here to my right and took a picture, and I got the same effect here. I crushed the ambient light in the background so that the flowers stand out more, and you can see that the lighting on the flowers hasn't changed much. It's still illuminated pretty well. And I think, creatively speaking, I like the first picture a little better with the warm glow of the grass in the background. But bringing this flash with me gave me some options that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's what I want you to do, is go out there and practice using off-camera flash, trying different things, and seeing how much better your photography will become virtually overnight with just getting a separate flash. So what we'll do now is let's go outside, and you can kind of follow me along in real time as I practice using the off-camera flash, and I talk about my thought process and why I changed settings when I did for different pictures. And it's essentially just two things: one of a tree with some leaves, and one of me sitting on a chair to do a portrait, because it seems like every flash tutorial online has a portrait type scenario in it. So it's almost obligatory I have to do one, right? Even though I'm not really a portrait guy, so what you're seeing here is basically me practicing self-portraits. I hadn't really done a lot in the past, and I think they came out alright. So let's go ahead and move over to that. Okay, so here I am over here by the tree, and I'm going to try and do just a regular picture in aperture priority. So let me set the camera to aperture priority. I'm going to make sure my off-camera flash is off, and I'm at 25 millimeters f5.6. So you should be able to duplicate these settings with almost any lens that you have in your bag. Okay, so let's try and just take a regular picture here. See what we get. And okay, that's all right. Very boring, but that's what we wanted, is boring this time. So let's try going into manual mode and use the on-camera flash to trigger the off-camera flash. So I need to make sure I have that off-camera flash set to manual value 1/64th power, which is the lowest setting, and is more than enough to fire the optical trigger on this flash. Okay, for the off-camera flash, I'm going to set the power to 1/64th, and I'm going to zoom the beam, because you can zoom this beam, make it narrower or wider. I'm going to make it as wide as possible so that I get as soft a light as I can out of this. And I can also put this little diffuser, although that's not really that necessary. But let's see what kind of picture we can get with this. And take a shot. Alright. Okay, that's a little bit dark. I'd say almost 2 stops. And you'll get a feel for this when you start practicing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the flash power to 1/16. And how I came to that is 1/64. Half that is 1/32 is a stop, and half of that is 1/16 is another stop. So now I've increased the flash power 2 stops on here. I'm going to try again and see what I get. Let's see how that looks. Oh yeah, much nicer. And you know, you can experiment different angles. So let's turn this facing forward but pointing up a little bit and try this way and see how that looks. Yeah, I mean a little bit different look, pretty much the same thing though. But that I think is makes a much nicer picture using the off-camera flash. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and sit in a chair and do some portraits using off-camera flash, so you can kind of get a feel for how that looks and how much better it looks when you take the use off-camera flash. Alright, so basically I have my scene set up. I have a chair here with a table, and I'm going to do an off-camera flash demonstration. And basically this is set up because I'm by myself, so I'm going to duplicate if I was actually hand holding the camera and flash, right? So if I was taking somebody's picture, I'd probably be doing something like this, right? So just ignore the fact that I'm using a tripod and a light stand, and pretend that I'm actually standing here taking a picture of my twin brother. Alright, so I'm going to move this camera over to where you can see. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture in aperture priority mode and with the flash off, and just see what the camera does all by itself without any help from me or the external flash. So I'm at f5.6, auto ISO, auto white balance, and I can already see the highlights are kind of blown. But in any case, let me just double check my settings. Okay, looks good. So I'm going to focus there and have a seat. Okay, so that should be the picture with just basically full auto aperture priority. And as you can see, the highlights are blown out. And see if I got myself in focus. Close enough for this. Okay, now I'm going to turn the flash on, just the on-camera flash, and see if the camera can do any better on its own. Let me double check the settings. And yes, the flash is on auto, or an aperture priority again. So let me try again. Okay, let's take a look at that. And yeah, it's better. You know, I'm getting some nice light. But let's try using the off-camera flash. And again, we're going to have to go into full manual, but it's not that big a deal. So let's go into manual. And what I'm going to do now is turn the flash head over so it's pointing at this optical trigger on the off-camera flash. And I'm still in f5.6, but going into manual, now I'm locked at ISO 200. Double check, yep. And 1/250th of a second. And let me check my flash settings. Get this out of sleep mode. And since I'm actually quite a bit further away from the flash now than, say, the vines and the tree over here, I'm going to try starting at full power with this flash. Alright, set this to full power. Okay, so now the flash is on full power. And I'm going to pre-focus on this doggy bowl here and see what that does for us. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, not bad. It looks a little unnatural though to me. So what I'm gonna do is double check here. I'm on full power. What I probably need to do is crush the ambient light a little bit too much, because when I'm looking at it, you know, I'm fairly well lit, the background's fairly well lit, but then all of the grass and everything is totally black, and that's not the look I was going for. So what I probably need to do is I can decrease the shutter speed, because I really can't get any more power out of the flash. So let's try doing that. And I was at 1/250th, and I was easily 3-4 stops down, so too dark. And like I said, you'll get a feel for how many stops of light you need to add or subtract. But let's say I was 4 stops down, so we're at 250, 125, 60, 1/30th of a second. So let's try 1/30th of a second and see what that does for us. And that might be too much. Let's try 1/60th, like 3 stops. Because what I don't want to do is crush the highlights or blow the highlights out too much. Okay, let's try that. Okay, and let's see if lowering the shutter speed helped. Yeah, that helped a lot. Here are the 4 pictures I took of the self-portrait side by side, just so you can kind of see them all at once. And I edited the 2 pictures with flash because I wanted to try to bring the highlights back in these pictures. And I shot these in JPEG, so there wasn't really a lot of wiggle room to begin with. But already you can see a pretty big difference in the off-camera flash and the on-camera flash. You can see that with the on-camera flash, the highlights are pretty much blown out. And with the off-camera flash, I was able to save those highlights, mainly because in full auto the camera chose ISO 500, which, you know, destroys your highlights or your dynamic range by raising the ISO. And raising ISO, yeah, it's great for the shadows and and lighting and it. And everyone always talks about how, you know, what's the grain look like at high ISO. And honestly, that's not the biggest problem with raising your ISO. The biggest problem with ISO is really it's crushing your highlights by bringing up the shadows. So this is a good example of that. And when you look at the picture with the off-camera flash, I was able to recover the highlights. You can see the church steeple, and you know, and the settings between the two in terms of editing were exactly the same. I turned the highlights down to its lowest setting on the slider. I raised the shadows about a half, and that's all I did. The only difference between the two in terms of editing is the off-camera flash one. I actually had to reduce the saturation about -14 on the slider because the colors were just too strong. And looking at these two, and hopefully you can see this through YouTube or whatever device you're looking at, the colors and the contrast are still much better on the off-camera flash one, and I think it's partially because the flash is a little bit of an angle, giving you better texture and shadow detail, and also I was able to shoot at ISO 200 versus ISO 500 with the other picture, so you get a lot of exposure benefits with off-camera flash beyond just the creative look to it, but you also get some technical improvements with respect to shooting at lower ISOs, recovering highlights and shadows because you're at the lower ISO, and getting better texture and shadows. So I recommend you watch like Tony and Chelsea Northrop's. They have some very good generic portrait photography or flash photography tutorials that you could apply to the Pen-F. And then when you get really good or really want to see some neat things, I recommend watching Jason Lanier's videos, because that guy is, I think, the master of all lighting people that I've seen online to date that I've seen. I'm sure there's many more out there, but he really uses a lot of different kinds of lighting and off-camera flash to get the most beautiful cameras basically straight out of camera, or beautiful pictures straight out of camera. So, but that's that for me with a Pen-F. Again, very minimal setup, just one flash and your Pen-F. And hopefully that helped. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them below. If you like this video, hit the like button. It just makes me feel good. And I'm going to make some more videos because I want to show you how to use the off-camera flash in combination with the ND filter, because you can get an ND filter, variable ND filter, kind of like this one, for about 40 or 50 bucks, and this is really a great alternative to buying or setting up high-speed sync type pictures. You can get pretty much the same effect with this. So I'll do a video on that, and maybe I'll do some strobe flashing and stuff as well. But in any case, thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.